This is not a routine business story. This is a political stress test. And it's happening in real time. What looks like a corporate decision is being weaponized into a national narrative, and the fallout is already reshaping the political landscape. California didn't just wake up to closed storefronts. It woke up to a coordinated panic campaign, amplified by Trump-aligned media, designed to turn economic anxiety into political fuel. Here's what just happened, and why it matters far beyond Walmart. Over the past year, a small number of Walmart locations in California shut their doors. Some closed quietly, others abruptly. Employees were told their jobs were gone, communities were left scrambling, and almost immediately, a familiar political machine went to work. Right-wing outlets began flooding social media with the same headline, repeated again and again with growing intensity. California governor in panic as Walmart shuts down hundreds of stores. That claim is false. There have not been hundreds of closures, not even close. But the lie spread faster than the facts, because the goal was never accuracy. The goal was outrage. Let me explain why this matters. Donald Trump has spent nearly a decade perfecting a strategy that turns isolated events into evidence of civilizational collapse. A single protest becomes a nation on fire, a court ruling becomes a coup, and now a handful of retail closures are being framed as proof that democratic governance destroys livelihoods. This is not analysis, it's propaganda, and it's being deployed deliberately in an election cycle where economic fear is the accelerant. The truth is more complicated, more boring, and far more dangerous to Trump's narrative. Walmart is not fleeing California en masse. The company operates hundreds of locations across the state and continues to open new distribution centers. The closures that did occur were driven by local lease disputes, underperforming footprints, and strategic consolidation that mirrors decisions Walmart has made in red states and blue states alike. But facts don't travel well in a media ecosystem addicted to outrage. Here's where it gets disturbing. Instead of acknowledging the complexity, Trump-aligned figures seized on the closures as a talking point to argue that democracy itself is incompatible with economic survival. They didn't just blame regulations, they blamed voting. They blamed labor protections, they blamed environmental laws, and implicitly, they blamed the people who supported them. This is classic authoritarian rhetoric. The system is broken, the elites are incompetent, only a strong man can fix it. Donald Trump has used this playbook before, when factories automated, when coal declined, when steel jobs disappeared. Each time, he promised restoration. Each time, the promises collapsed under scrutiny. And each time, the blame shifted back to institutions, not his own failures. What's happening now is a repeat performance, scaled for a fractured media age. California's governor is not in panic. What Republican operatives are in panic about is losing control of the narrative. Because when you strip away the hysteria, what remains is inconvenient for Trump. California's economy remains the largest in the nation. It continues to generate more GDP than most countries. Job growth persists. Wages, while uneven, trend upward. None of that fits the apocalyptic story Trump needs to tell. So the story must be bent. Walmart closures become symbols, empty parking lots become political theater, and workers, the very people Trump claims to champion, are reduced to props in a broader ideological war. This is not about Walmart, it's about power. Let me be very clear about the pattern. Donald Trump thrives on manufactured crises. He inflates them, distorts them, and then positions himself as the only solution. The facts are irrelevant. The emotion is the point. We saw it with immigration, where he described an invasion despite declining border crossings during parts of his own presidency. We saw it with crime, where he painted American cities as war zones even as violent crime rates dropped. And now we're seeing it with the economy, where selective data points are used to argue that democratic governance equals collapse. This is how democratic erosion works. Not with tanks in the streets, but with relentless narrative pressure that convinces people the system is irredeemable. And the danger is not hypothetical. Trump has already promised mass deportations without due process. He has pledged to use the Justice Department as a weapon. He has openly talked about terminating parts of the Constitution. When economic anxiety is layered on top of that rhetoric, the result is combustible. That's why this Walmart narrative matters. Because it's being used to normalize the idea that rights are luxuries, that regulations are enemies, that elections produce chaos, and that only authoritarian control can restore order. There's a legal dimension here that cannot be ignored. When Trump and his allies push demonstrably false claims about economic collapse, they are not just misleading voters, they are undermining public trust in institutions that rely on shared reality to function. Courts depend on facts, markets depend on confidence, democracies depend on informed consent. This erosion of truth has consequences. We are already seeing lawsuits tied to misinformation-driven market volatility. We are seeing threats against public officials fueled by false narratives. We are seeing workers pitted against their own protections, convinced that the laws designed to safeguard them are the reason they're struggling. That is not accidental. That is design. And Trump knows exactly what he's doing. This is the same man who told Americans not to trust elections unless he won. The same man who called judges enemies when they ruled against him. The same man who incited a mob by convincing them democracy had betrayed them. Now he's telling working families that democracy is costing them their jobs. The escalation is intentional, and the timing is no coincidence. As Trump faces mounting legal exposure, from criminal trials to civil judgments, his political survival depends on chaos. He needs voters angry, confused, and distrustful. Economic fear is the most effective tool he has left. So every closed store becomes a rallying cry. Every layoff becomes a talking point, and every nuance is flattened into blame. Here's the reality Trump will not acknowledge. Walmart's business model has been under pressure nationwide. E-commerce competition, changing consumer habits, real estate recalibration. These forces are not partisan, they are structural. But acknowledging that would require honesty, and honesty is incompatible with Trumpism. Instead, he offers a villain. California, Democrats, regulations, democracy itself. That framing is not just wrong, it is corrosive, because it trains the public to see governance as the enemy, rather than a tool to be improved. It primes voters to accept extreme solutions, and it lowers the threshold for anti-democratic action. We are watching the groundwork being laid, and it should alarm every American, regardless of party. This is not about defending a governor or a corporation, it is about defending reality. When political movements abandon facts, they do not replace them with better ideas. They replace them with loyalty tests, with scapegoats, with coercion. Donald Trump has shown us where that road leads. January 6 was not an anomaly. It was the logical endpoint of years of narrative manipulation that convinced millions the system was illegitimate. The Walmart panic narrative is cut from the same cloth, smaller in scale, but identical in intent. And here's the most sobering part. It's working. Polls show growing distrust in institutions, growing belief that democracy cannot deliver, growing openness to strong leadership unconstrained by law. That is the real crisis. Not a closed store, not a lease dispute, but a political movement that profits from despair. So when you hear claims that California is collapsing, ask who benefits from that belief. When you hear that democracy is the problem, ask who wants fewer checks on their power. And when you hear Donald Trump promising simple answers to complex problems, remember his record. Remember the chaos. Remember the lies. Remember the cost. This moment matters because it reveals how easily economic anxiety can be weaponized against democracy itself. We are not watching a business story. We are watching a propaganda campaign, and the stakes could not be higher. Stay informed, stay sharp, and stay connected, because the next chapter of this story will not be quieter.